Welcome, welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I know that that's what I want. I want a meaningful life. I want a life that when I get to the end, I'm like, dang, girl, you did it. I don't want one of those lives where you get to the end and you say, I wish I had. Regret is the worst of the human emotions because you can do nothing about it. It's in the past. You can't change it. Now, if it motivates you to change, then regret maybe has a split second in your life because you're like, I regret that I didn't do that, but this time around, I'm going to do this. So one of my thoughts I've always had is like, I could have been a doctor. And what would my life be like if I had been a doctor? It would be very, very different. And if I were to be a doctor, what kind of doctor would I be? Well, if you've watched this show very long, you know that for me, the study of the brain and how the brain works and how it connects with the heart and how that we can use our entire cellular body structure to truly move us in the direction we want. You know that about me. Well, that's a neuroscientist. And to that end today, I have one of the best neuroscientists who's been a professor at Rutgers University for 20 years on the show, and we get to have a one-on-one conversation with her. So to that end, I welcome to the podcast Tracey Shors. Welcome, welcome, Tracey.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So you probably didn't know that was my secret desire, was to be a neuroscientist.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So explain to my guests exactly what a neuroscientist is and kind of what your life is dedicated to studying.
Okay. Neuroscience is kind of a broad term, and
It is.
it encompasses kind of a lot of different types of people, that study the brain. But I think one thing that distinguishes maybe a neuroscientist from, say, a neurologist or a neuropsychologist is that we do research.
Yep.
We're really trying to discover how the brain works, as opposed to maybe treating a neurological disorder or doing neurosurgery. Right? We're more like scientists as opposed to clinicians. But it gets a little blurry sometimes. Some people do both. A lot of people actually do both. They see patients and then they also study the brain. But yeah, so I've kind of done a little bit of all of that. I initially started out as a kind of like studying the connection between psychology and biology. We call it behavioral neuroscience. So it's like how our thoughts and behaviors are mediated, by the brain. And for a long time, I did kind of more what we would call wet lab research, meaning going into having a laboratory, looking in the microscope at neurons, or maybe recording from the brain electrophysiologically to see how it works. And I did that for about 20 years or so. And then I also, more recently, like the last decade, have been working more with people, trying to help people recover from trauma, kind of deal with their everyday life, stressors, things like that. And then, meanwhile, also studying it.
Right.
Trying to understand how does that work? When you say help people, what does that mean? How is the brain really changing during that process?
And I think that is the part that intrigues me the most, is the research part. And then I just know me, my natural path would have led me then to take that research and use it to actually help people, which is exactly what you did. So in my next life, I get to be you. And people will call me, instead of Dr. Shors, it'll be Dr. Crafts. I love that. Sounds fabulous. But as I read about some of the things that you've been doing, Tracey, and this brain mapping that has always held such fascination to me, I was struck by that the thing that you were actually researching was a question that I had had. Because at my age, and all the different things that I have walked through, and the different modalities that I have used to heal my life, I still at times find myself ruminating or thinking about past stressful trauma situations. And then I'll shake myself and I'm like, that's not part of my life now. And I've actually walked through that, and I've seen how to heal that, and I've done all those things. Why at times do I still find myself thinking about those stressful situations? And when I read your bio, I was like, what? That's been her research? And that's how she has, you've even written a book, Mapping the Brain? What's it called?
It's actually called...
Let's show the book.
Okay, I'll show it.
I haven't bought it yet, so I don't have it.
Everyday trauma.
Yeah, everyday trauma. And I loved how the one side, the brain looked like bleh, like
Yeah.
it'd been put through a mixer. And the other
that's
side,
most of us.
yeah, most of us, yeah. And then our brain actually can be more systematic and calm. And just by looking at that drawing, I felt calmer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more like the word kind of literally would be synchronized. You know,
Yeah.
because our brain is, and I don't know how many people appreciate this, but it's really runs on electricity. You know, it uses electrical current to think, have feelings, have memories, and that current is caused by ions going across the membrane, and it generates a current. And and then neurons fire, that's how they
Right.
communicate with each other. And you want those responses to be synchronized. When things are in synchrony, then they are more easily passed around the brain. And if they're not in synchrony, they're kind of like all over the place, some firing here, some firing there, it's more difficult to extract information.
So,
It's part of the process of learning, really.
so it's learning to synchronize the brain firing rather than.
Yeah, I mean,
not going to relate to that when you said random. I'm like blink, 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 blink.
Yeah, it's not like we can really, well, I guess we can learn to synchronize it, but it's not as direct as that. That's the process. The learning is the psychology of it. We're learning something new. Maybe we're learning how not to ruminate, or we're learning about rumination. And in that process, our brain, I think, becomes more synchronized.
All right. So if I want to do this, I really want to step into that place of not having those old traumas ever come across my brain, or if they do, they're not stressful.
Yeah.
What is the process?
I mean,
You've come up with a technique that I think is pretty unique.
Yeah. I mean, I have a way, I developed a way that helps people not ruminate as much. And then how that happens is a little more, that's the research part. That's the question that's more experimental, I guess you could say. But about 10 or 15 years ago, I was working in the lab, and or even actually longer, when it was first discovered. So for a long time, people didn't know that the brain makes new neurons. So like when I went to school, we learned that the brain doesn't make any more neurons after you're born. And, in general, that's true. Like 99.9% of the neurons you have in your brain, you've had since you were born.
Really?
They don't regenerate like all of your skin cells, your liver cells, all the other cells in your body. Neurons don't typically regenerate. And so that's kind of, was the status quo basically till the 90s. There were some studies in the 70s and 80s suggesting that there were these neurons that were created in adulthood, but no one really believed it. Anyway, those neurons were discovered to exist in this part of the brain called the hippocampus. And we use
yes.
the hippocampus to learn. That's how we, acquire new information, is through our hippocampus. Memories aren't stored in our hippocampus. Sometimes people think that, but they're actually just, the hippocampus tells us where we are in space and time. There's neurons that are called place cells. They tell you where you are. There's time cells that tell you what time it is, when you're there. And so I like to think of the hippocampus as kind of creating the story of our lives. When we think about what we've done in our lifetime, who we met, our children, our families, our childhood, we create these stories based on where we were and what we were doing. And the hippocampus participates in that, kind of like a movie maker, I think of it almost. So these neurons happen to be in the hippocampus. So I was like, well, that's weird. Why would they be there? And so, we did some studies showing that they're used for learning. And, not only that by learning something new, you could keep them alive. Because many of them tend to die. But if you learn something new, and as long as it's effortful and you actually learn, they survive.
So that's why they want us to keep doing crossword puzzles and learn a new language in our 70s.
Yeah. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things, and we could talk about that, but, I think it's more than crossword puzzles. I mean, they're okay, but you always want to be doing something that's new and challenging. And, I think something like crossword puzzles are fine, but it's more, you really want to try something completely new. Like some people say to me, like, well, I play the guitar. I'm like, well, do you play the same songs? Yeah, pretty much. Well, that's
not new.
Probably sufficient. You maybe want to take up the saxophone or like try a completely new language. You want to really challenge yourself, not just keep doing the same things that you kind of have already done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's kind of the learning part. And then there was another group of scientists who discovered that aerobic, or particularly exercise, but in particular aerobic activity, enhanced the production of these cells. And an aerobic, of course, meaning requiring oxygen. So that's like, again, kind of an effortful activity, something that you're sweating, your heart is beating fast, typically over 100, beats per minute. So it's not just taking a walk. It's
right.
Really engaging in exercise. And so I had this idea. It's like, well, what if we combine these two findings into like an intervention, something that would challenge us mentally, but also challenge us aerobically. So I, devised this intervention, or it's like I call it a brain fitness program, basically, because anyone can do it. You don't have to have, some, mental disorder or neurological problem to do it. Anyone can do it and should, really. And it's 30 minutes of meditation, followed by 30 minutes of aerobic exercise.
Okay.
So it's called MAP because it's mental and physical.
Brilliant.
So you do like one activity and then the meditation, which is effortful, because it requires a lot of patience, concentration, to sit. This is like sitting in silence, basically.
Yeah.
So not following someone else who's meditating. It's more just really sitting with your own thoughts and watching them come, and how they are. They come and they go. They're not always good, but they're transient, luckily. That's the good thing about thoughts, they're transient. And so it's kind of like learning that, learning who you are. What do you tend to think about? So I think of it as a meditation, as a learning process, because you're always learning who you are when you meditate.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. And it's always new. It's always effortful. Hardly anyone meditates and says, "Oh, that was so easy." Like, it's always a little challenge.
Yeah, it's active listening. It's
active
listening
to your own thoughts.
Yep.
And it's surprising how few people have done that, and even myself, like when I first started meditating, I was a full-on adult by then, and I was like, wow, I never really listened to my own brain create thoughts.
Yeah. Some people don't want to listen. I don't want to hear.
They don't. But it's important because, again, they're just thoughts.
Yeah.
Even though they might be attached to like a lot of emotions and feelings, it's important to learn that they're just thoughts created by this piece of fat and tissue in our head.
Yeah, it's not. I would like to understand sometimes those random thoughts more, but I think that is what MAP allows us.
It does, and it's the meditation followed by this aerobic exercise. It's only an hour. I wanted to create something that anyone could do. It wouldn't take up all this time, or it wouldn't cost a lot of money.
And is it a daily practice, or how often do you?
Well, in our studies, we only had people do it like twice a week.
Ah.
And some of our findings, it's probably closer to one. So like once or twice a week was sufficient to have all these positive outcomes. I did a lot of studies I was particularly interested in, and still am, on women who've had trauma, which is a lot of women actually, particularly sexual trauma.
Yeah.
But we've done it with people who are depressed, people who are anxious. I did it with medical students. We did it with just, so-called normal, healthy controls. It doesn't really, it helps pretty much everyone that we've tested. The most consistent finding that we've had is that people say that they ruminate less. So they have fewer of those thoughts that you were talking about, those kind of like repetitive thoughts about the past. They're usually negative. They're usually, they're always autobiographical, right? So they're always about your life.
Right.
But they're also usually filled with a little bit of regret or blame. Like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. If I hadn't done this, then that wouldn't have happened. And if only I could go back and redo whatever.
Yeah.
And so and I think the worst thing about ruminations is they keep you from being present now.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're like in the past, you could do it all. Think about it. You're off, you're having this nice dinner maybe with your family, and you're like off in the past, like thinking about some other time in your life, and you're not able to concentrate on what's happening now. So I think that's why they're so damaging in a way.
Mm-hmm. Because the now is really all we have.
It's
this
all we
moment,
have.
this in time.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to spend this time with you, and that's the most important thing that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Especially as a podcaster, you don't want to be ruminating about some kind of crazy thing, and then all of a sudden, what did she say? Stay focused on the now.
Really, and I like to think of it as a skill, and meditation helps with that. We learn to be present now, because you're like, oh, I don't really want to be sitting here listening to my thoughts, and so you kind of learn that skill. But you learn, well, it's okay. Nothing bad is going to happen. I'm not going to disappear or have some attack. And so you learn it's okay to be present.
So these two steps, meditation and physical, I want to talk about each one of those a little bit more in depth.
Okay.
Let's start with the physical though. So you say this is an aerobic experience. And on your website, some of your cute videos show you meditating and then doing this, cute dance video, boing, boing, and you're just so cute, so jazzy. And I love to dance, and so dancing aerobics are always fun for me. But most of the time, I'm on a treadmill and I'm, pounding the pavement and varying my ups and downs, so I do get my heart rate up without muscle memory. And is that kind of exercise all right, or does it need to be more using more of the body in movement? So explain to me more what exactly you're describing with aerobic exercise.
Okay. It doesn't really matter. You know, when I first devised this program, I wanted to make it accessible. And and I love dance aerobics too. I've been doing it since I was like 20.
I could tell. I could tell.
Jane Fonda, Jane Fonda aerobics when I lived in Los Angeles. So I was always into like dancing and getting my heart rate up that way, and I still prefer that. But not everybody does. You know, a lot of people are like either don't like it, maybe they're intimidated by it. Particularly men don't necessarily gravitate towards dance aerobics.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make something that, you know, anyone could do and not necessarily also have to have a teacher. You know, because that's the other thing with aerobics, dance aerobics, you kind of have to have someone lead you.
Well, unless you have it inside of you, can I just say?
Well, yeah. Yeah, like we obviously do. But
yeah, because my other thing, other than being a neuroscientist, is that in my next life, I do want to be a dancer.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you there. I'm definitely with you on that one. In fact, I've been doing a lot of dance classes in New York, and it's challenging to say the least. But the first studies we did, we just had people run on a treadmill. Because, you know, that was accessible.
Sure, for everyone.
And I just wanted to make it so, like I said, so anyone could do it. So we initially had people run on a treadmill or maybe on a bike, you know, a spinning bike. And it didn't really matter. Like the effects we see, it doesn't really seem to matter. I also have this free program that anyone can do on my website at Map Train My Brain, where I do have like these, I call it movements to music. It's not super dancey, but it's a little, you know, it's a little bit, it has some choreography in it. And I think it's good to some extent because it also helps people not think about other things. You know, when you're exercising like that, particularly if there's some movement, choreographed movement in it, you can't think about anything else. You have to pay attention. And I think that's also part of the process that helps people not ruminate because you can't.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a key piece.
It is a key, I think.
That's different. So if I were just, you know, in my back private yard with my Lady Gaga on, and of course that dates me, but if I was doing that in my backyard, I can be the total free spirit, that dancing like no one is watching or everyone is watching and you're the star of the show, you know. Yeah. Whatever it is that allows that free spirit to be in you. And involving all of my body parts, you're absolutely right, Tracey. When I am moving like that, I don't think of anything else.
Yeah.
Versus on the treadmill, I think of everything.
Yeah, the treadmill's a little more difficult to really escape.
Yeah.
I can do it. Like after about 10 minutes, I kind of get there. But the first 10 or 15 minutes, I feel like I'm still like thinking about other things.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
So I do think that the dance part is important, but it's not necessary for sure.
Sure.
Because like I said, in our studies, a lot of times we had people just going on a treadmill, and they still showed, you know, really positive effects. You know, a lot of the studies I have done are with women, and it's hard to pull out all the important pieces. But I do think, like particularly in a group, it's also social.
Yeah.
So we had these women, particularly when we were doing it in person, you know, they would kind of get to know each other. And then I remember a couple studies where they would come in and they'd be all kind of like in a bad mood and, you know, kind of complaining about all these different things that they were doing in their life. And by the end of the class, they were like, you know, laughing and talking. And so, yeah, it's a lot of different things.
It reminds me of the movie Legally Blonde, when she's the lawyer defending this woman, and she's like, there's no way she committed this murder. She's a dance instructor. She has way too many endorphins going on.
Yeah. That whole endorphin thing is probably a little bit oversold, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea that when we're active, that we have our brains actively engaged in physical activity, we're in a very healthy mindset for the most part.
And and our brain is learning that just because our heart is racing and maybe we're sweating, we're kind of in a fight or flight response. It's the nervous system is in this kind of sympathetic it's called a sympathetic nervous system response. We're having fun. And a lot of people, particularly with trauma, but even just like thinking about traumatic experiences, your heart starts to race. You kind of get anxious, and you maybe even go into like a panic state. And I have things that have happened to me in my life. Some of them are like, my son. I remember one time he almost choked on a grape. I can't even think about it because it makes me crazy if I think like, what if I hadn't noticed and I hadn't, because I had to do the Heimlich on him and a diner, and he was, so you have these memories, and you kind of like go back and you start to think about it, and then you're like, oh, and then you're nervous. I get like, I could feel my heart just going, and like, what if I hadn't saved him? And and then what if that happens again? And I would cut up the grapes into these tiny little pieces, and I'd be like, okay, Evan, you could have one grape, and it's more like grape juice now.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It makes you so anxious, and so I think you're learning to kind of dissociate that anxiety, that fear response from just having fun. Because the response is kind of the same. When you're exercising and having fun, you're also in a sympathetic response. So it's kind of dissociating your brain from the body, like learning that those don't necessarily always have to be, they don't have to go together in a negative way.
Yeah. So in thinking about the time frame, I think I want to understand that piece. So does it matter the time frame between when I meditate and when I do the aerobics? Do they need to be one right after the other, or can I meditate in the morning and do my aerobic in the afternoon? I mean, so what is that correspondence?
Well, they should be done together.
Okay.
I haven't really studied that particular response. We did do a study where we had people only meditate twice a week, only exercise twice a week, or do both together, and they were better. They had better response.
Sure.
They did both. But again, I think it's important that the body is going through this transition. You're sitting in meditation. That's very parasympathetic.
Right.
Meaning the heart rate is super low, the brain is calm, it's kind of mediated even by different neurotransmitters. And so you're learning to be relaxed, even though your thoughts might be running around in your head, thinking about the past, worrying about the future. You're still in this very calm state. Right? So again, you're kind of learning to dissociate these thoughts, oftentimes negative, from the body. And then you immediately switch almost like to the opposite, right? Now your heart rate is really fast, and maybe you're thinking a little bit, but probably not as much as you were when you were meditating. So I do think it's important to do them together.
Okay. That was a question I had. So Thank you. I will, if I do this twice a week is harder. Once a week would be easy. I want to pick a day that I can have the time to do that full transition. Okay, I like that. All right, now let's go back to the beginning and talk about meditation. Set us up the scenario of what that meditation looks like, and how do we step into that? So it's not like, I mean,
So the
I know how to meditate, but there'll be people who are listening that are like, well, I've never done that. What do I do?
I know. I mean, I was like that. I had never meditated before, having studied the brain for, many, many years. And I was a little bit surprised at how interesting it is, actually.
Yeah.
I think I always thought of it as really maybe too difficult, but maybe not scientific enough. I don't know what I thought, but I didn't understand how powerful it is. So the meditation that we use in this program is similar to Zen. It's very, it's silent. When you, sometimes in scientific circles, they call it focused attention meditation. Mm-hmm. So you're focusing your attention on just one thing. And in this case, it's the breath.
Yep.
So you just, and the reason why people use the breath is because it's portable. It's always with us.
Yeah. Thank heavens.
We're always breathing, but we're not, so we want to appreciate it. And it's always changing. The breath you take right now is you've never taken before. So you can kind of use it as a metaphor for your life. Each breath is completely new. And so what we have people do is kind of notice the breath, then start counting it, each breath, like counting the little space between the out breath and the next in breath. The little space, it's often called the little death, because you're not breathing in and you're not breathing out. So you just kind of focus in, oh, wait, there's this little space between the out breath and the in breath that maybe you never even really noticed before. You just count that space. Now, I usually tell people, I'll count to 1,000. Well, no one ever gets to 1,000.
Right.
Right? You get to 5 or 6, and then you're like, I wonder what I'll have for dinner tonight. Or,
Yeah.
why did I do that crazy thing?
I can get to 20, but that's about it.
Yeah, 20 is about for me too.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised sometimes people really are pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But the point isn't really to get good at counting. It's more to train your brain, to notice, oh, I'm not paying attention anymore. And then you go back to 1. Right? And that's how your brain is learning, I'm not present.
Yeah.
I'm just simply not present. And that's the learning part, I think.
Yeah. So after bringing ourselves to the awareness of present and the breath, people will ask, so I just do that for 30 minutes?
Well, it's a little bit different. It's 20 minutes of that, of sitting, counting the breath. Then we do 10 minutes of what's called slow walking meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And slow walking meditation is a really ancient practice.
Yeah.
That I actually really like. It's more, you're moving very slowly. We stand up, start walking in a circle, or it doesn't matter, but just walk super, super slow. And think about your feet.
Yeah.
The feet are like the hands are super full of nerves. And we don't think about them that often. We're always running around, going here, going there, but we don't ever think wow, my feet, are really important.
Yeah, I thank them every day.
I know, they're and they're so sensitive, so you kind of put your head or your brain, your attention in your feet. And instead of counting, you just pay attention to your feet. And then when your mind starts to wander around again, thinking about the past or worrying about the future, you go back. You say, oh, wow, I'm not thinking about my feet anymore. And then go back to your feet.
It's my favorite part of the meditation.
Yeah, I like it too.
And I am very fortunate that I live in Salt Lake City in Utah in the mountains. And so I go to my garden 8 months of the year. I get to be outside for my meditation. And so when I do this slow walk, I'm in the grass and just barefoot and connecting and feeling that groundedness to the earth. Yeah. And it's the most beautiful part.
Yeah, it's a beautiful practice. I remember one time I went to this meditation retreat, and they were like, we're going to go walk in the woods. And he said, and everyone got kind of excited, right? Because we've been sitting inside in silence for like a long time. And he said, don't get excited. Just walk. Don't be like, oh, there's a stream. I wonder where that stream goes. Yeah. What a beautiful day. It's not like you don't want to have good thoughts, but like, just don't let your mind like run away from itself. Just be present in your body as you walk.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I love that. But it's, it is tough. It's tough to do that.
It is.
Yeah.
For me, I walk in the same area in my garden. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not like noticing new things. It's not like, oh, look at that beautiful. It's the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
And for those people, I always am very encouraging, if you're not in a position where you can meditate outside and walk barefoot in the grass every day, don't despair. Because the positive energy from our planet Earth is so powerful that it can transmit through rubber soles, in our homes, wherever we might be, but it takes a lot of focus for that to happen.
Exactly. And in fact, I think to some extent, it's like you were saying, it's almost easier to do it in a familiar place.
Yeah.
Or just to the extent that you're not distracted.
Right.
Like I do it in the hallway sometimes, just because it's kind of like simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I just can see you doing that because I've watched your videos of moving, and I'm like, it's so dang cute.
Oh, I had so much fun. I was in Greece a couple weeks ago, and the organizer of the meeting let me do mat training for the neuroscientists that were at this meeting. And she sent me some photos last night, and I was like, wow, I just love that, because you have all these neuroscientists, walking really slow in this big room with me. And I was like, wow, I just love that idea, right? Of everyone doing the same thing together, but being like concentrating. It's kind of cool.
If you can get permission from those guys, I would love to have you put that up on your website. I'd love to see that. Even just a single photo of what that looks like. And
I will.
Get people inspired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here with this group of neuroscientists from all over the world, and Tracey's there, slow.
I know. They're probably the first like, okay.
Right.
Where's your slides? Don't you have any data slides?
Yeah, Dr. Shors, where's your PowerPoint?
Yeah, it was really fun.
So talk to me about the resources for the listeners of how they can learn more about this. I went to your website and spent quite a long time there. You actually have a lot of free stuff there.
I do. So I did make this course. It's 6 weeks, or it's really 6 sessions. And so you can do it, as often or as you want. And each session is 1 hour. At the beginning, I talk a little bit about the brain, or something about, just something to get people's interest, kind of piqued about like what practice is about. And then I go through 20 minutes of sitting meditation, 10 minutes of slow walking, and then there's the 30 minutes of this kind of choreographed exercise to music. And that is on there for free. You just had to, I think you just had to put in your email, and you can do the sessions on your own if you feel like it, or in a group. So I hear some people are using it even like with groups.
Yeah.
There's other things on there. I have my book, of course, Everyday Trauma, which I'm still
Yeah, I think the
promoting.
book, to be able to have a tangible book to refer to. I'm an audio person, so I listen to a lot of Audible, but I rarely listen to an Audible that I haven't first purchased the book from, because I find that they'll refer to things, and I'm like, well, where is that in the Audible? You can't. I mean, it's like an
Yeah.
illustration, and I'm like, I need it. So I always like to work with both hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because I've been doing audibles a lot too lately, but then I'm like, where was that? I know I heard
Yeah.
that somewhere. Yeah.
So I will purchase the book and then listen to the Audible. I will do
Okay,
that. I will
perfect.
go on and buy that book. And then you also offer like individual training. I didn't quite understand that part.
Yeah, I mean, I do. If somebody's interested in like doing map training for a group or even just on their own, they can contact me at maptrainmybrain@gmail, and then we can set something up. So I've done map train. Like sometimes people just want to do one session with me, just to kind of get a little bit more sense of how it works, or they want to ask questions. So, I've done it over Zoom with people. I've gone to schools and done it for classrooms or like gym classes. So, it's pretty, like I said, it's pretty accessible, but sometimes people like a little more information or a
Yeah.
little more uh, um, guidance.
Yeah, because I'm
And I'm
thinking
happy.
I do a monthly ladies' night out, and we do different things. Sometimes we just, have fun and drink, and sometimes we talk about purpose and what purpose. Well, how was our purpose leading us in the past month? I mean, sometimes it's very in depth, and sometimes it's very light. But I was thinking of different things that I could add to this night, and it's usually I limit it to 15. The first 15 people that sign up each time. So I have a small group, and I don't charge people to come. So for me, it's just I'm trusting that the universe and those people's hearts see it at the right time and get there. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what happens every time. But I was thinking that this could be a great thing to do for one of our ladies' night out, and then I could gift them the book at the
Yeah.
end of the session.
That would
And
be perfect, actually. I
yeah,
would like to do that.
I think that would be a fabulous thing to do for our
Yeah, because
group.
like I said, I've done it with these groups before, and it's really pretty miraculous, like how people
Yeah,
change, just how they interact with one another, and it's just, everyone's a little vulnerable, so it kind of
right.
helps people like not be so afraid to do something new with other people, and yeah.
I think in my downstairs, I could host it at my home this time, and in the big circle area, we could do the meditation, and then I have kind of more of an open area. We could immediately move to the aerobics. I'm going to throw this out and see if my group would like to do this. I think this would be so exciting. I would love
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I would
Oh,
love.
Tracy, thank you so much for being with me today. And I think that you've given me personally some things that I'm going to do and start, and as I find success and peace with this, then to be able to share it with larger groups. And by the time this podcast comes out, I will have done it enough weeks that I'm so excited to take this live so that I can put on there, and it worked.
No, I would love that, because that's the thing is you kind of don't know how good it feels until you do it.
Right,
And then you're like, wow, this is really feels good. And it only takes an hour. It's not like, some big involved thing.
right. An hour once a week. That sometimes for some women in the middle of their life seems overwhelming. But if you actually think about the consequence and the results of taking an hour, this hour of self-care and self-love and self-worth, what will be the result of that in 3 months?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't This is the kind of thing, Tracey, that's such an active participant thing. We don't have to say, just think of the results in 10 years. We can say, think of the results in 3 months of the peace and that will generate and the clarity of mind. I love it. Tracey, you're brilliant. And thank you for taking time to be with us today on the podcast. And we've included all the links you need at the end of the podcast. And you can always reach out to me directly if you have any questions or can't find the link, that's right. Or Tracey Shors, and you can see how her name is spelled there. And you can search, she's on Instagram, you can find her there, or at your website. Tell the website again, Tracey.
It's M-A-P, trainmybrain.com.
There you go. Pretty easy. All right, Tracey. And until next time, this is just a piece of how we craft that meaningful life that we all want, we all desire, that we all know is inside of our purpose to be our very best selves. Namaste.
Crafting a meaningful life.